Hello, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Arrington, Director of Business Development at MLT, and I am moderating today's discussion. Thank you, Patricia and Janice, for joining us today. We'd love to start the conversation since both of you have a wealth of experience in working in the learning and development space with talent. Would love to hear your thoughts on what challenges you have seen in elevating and developing mid-career talent.
Janice, do you want to get started?
Sure, I can get us started. And good morning and or good afternoon, based on wherever you are, to everyone today. I think one of the things that comes to mind first for me, Gabrielle, when thinking about the challenges in developing mid-career talent, is actually that it's not just in developing that talent that we have a responsibility to do. We actually have a responsibility to identify that talent and do that in equitable ways, to take action to retain that talent. And so development can be a part of that retention lever, but oftentimes finances can be part of that retention lever, opportunities for development and growth and experiential learning can be a part of that retention lever, and mobility. There has to be options and roles and potential places for that talent to go once they've been developed. And then lastly, exposure. You need to be able to give that talent exposure to a network, to the projects and processes where the attention is at your organization. And then yes, formal development. All of those things are really important. And oftentimes, I think a lot of organizations focus on maybe one or two of those things, but they're missing the other one or two of those things. And to really invest in that talent, you have to have all of those.
Thank you. I would just add, as I think about challenges I've seen throughout the over decade of delivering the career advancement program at MLT and in my private practice as well, what I have noticed, and it really upsets me, is that many managers, even before George Floyd, but it got worse afterwards, are not giving their diverse employees, and this includes women of all ethnicities as well, and races, as well as Black, Latin American, Hispanic, and Indigenous. They're not giving them the developmental feedback that's robust. They're giving them, this is what you did well, this is really great, these were their contributions, and here's a little tiny thing that really doesn't matter. And then they're wondering why they're not advancing. And I wonder, are these managers not giving the feedback because they're scared to upset the person and maybe thwart some of their acceleration in terms of the work product? Are they unskilled at knowing how to deliver the information? Do they feel they're going to be perceived as racist or overly critical? But that information is gold. To know where the deficits are, what could be even better, and to have it articulated in a way that it lands and you know what to do, that's missing. And it's probably missing across the board, but it seems to affect our populations even more so. And what I do find in our program, I hear it time after time. The coach, which is part of the cadence of the program, asks the manager 3 questions. What are this person's signature strengths? What could be even better? Is there anything else you'd like to share? And all of a sudden, it's like a piñata. All of these treasures fall out. And the coach is then able to share that with the CAP fellow, the participant, and they are saying, I never heard that before. I didn't know that. Oh, I could work on that. And you're like, what? Why? And so one of the things that I believe is preventing the development, information. They're not getting clear, concise, actionable information.
One thing I'll also just add into what Patricia just shared, and completely agree. I've also found that this is relevant for all talent at what I like to call the magic middle, not just underrepresented talent. It's hard to get clear feedback, and it's hard to identify the actual skills and business acumen needed for success at that level in many organizations. And so oftentimes when there are development programs and or feedback conversations, the leaders giving that feedback or running those programs are upskilling in the skills that the executives at said company don't actually believe are the skills of the future or the skills to drive there. And so there needs to be work done to really ensure that at any organization and in any job function, you understand what are the skills that are needed at that next level and invest in those skills for again, all of your talent, but especially your underrepresented talent. Because when that does not happen systemically, maybe you can get that feedback through a mentorship or through someone in your network. That we all know folks in non-underrepresented talent tend to have stronger networks in corporate America. And so that leaves our underrepresented talent having, absolutely to Patricia's point, no knowledge of where their gaps are, no knowledge of the skills that are needed at the next level. And oftentimes folks are working really, really hard, but sometimes on the wrong things, just because, to Patricia's point, they don't have access to the information on what is that secret sauce to get to the next level.
Absolutely. I have two more points to add to that. One is about capacity. Because you have a skill, it does not mean that that skill scales and you can take it to capacity. You may be able to manage 3 people brilliantly, but when someone says manage 20 people, it doesn't scale because you don't have the processes and the experience, et cetera. So how do you get that before you need it? How do you get turns at bat? It's one of the things we do in the program, give you turns at bat that are experiential. And the other thing, to underscore another point you made, Janice, when I ask even people I'm coaching privately in my private practice, do you understand in terms of your deliverables, what is critical, what is important, and what is nice to have? Do you understand the distinction between those 3 levels of things that you're responsible for? Because what we tend to do is when we have a lot of energy, we work on the nice to have because they're fun. And we get to the end of the year and the boss is like, yeah, well, you're not going to get a great rating. The important things got done, the nice to haves got done, but one of the criticals was never done. And the person is like, I didn't know that was critical. Well, you got to ask the question. You've got to make sure you're calibrating with your leadership and with the must-win battles strategically of the company. And I don't know that we're thinking and dialing that in clearly.
Absolutely. And I believe those are all poignant points, Patricia and Janice, looking at ways that talent can identify their areas of development, being able to invest financially in development, Janice, as you noted, as well, and being able to catch those blind spots with a mentor as well as a coach. I wanted to also ask about your thoughts on how the workforce will evolve to meet the increasing complexity and challenges and opportunities with artificial intelligence and changing DE&I priorities. We know that artificial intelligence has impacted entry-level and mid-level career jobs with layoffs from several companies and organizations. And also some companies are deprioritizing investing in diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'd love your thoughts about how you see the workforce evolving to meet these increasing complexities and challenges.
I will hand that off to Janice because she is in the workforce and we love that you've done the CAP program, but you are dealing with this on a daily basis in your workspace. So would love to hear as well.
Yes, I'm happy to share. So I'll answer the DEI shifting piece first, and then we can circle back to the AI impacts. And so there are a lot of external forces that are providing even more challenges than we have had in the past when we are trying to do D&I, DEI, DIB work. And so from a learning perspective, one thing that we have done at Capital One is really try to focus on, as I mentioned earlier, identifying what are the skills that folks need to be successful within our organization. and ensuring that we are giving all of our associates access to develop those skills. And as we identify the talent that needs the access to those skills, considering demographic factors in that, but really working to make sure that we are trying to democratize learning for all. And so giving everybody equal access to build those skills, equal opportunity to build those skills, and equal opportunity to understand the value of learning and investing in yourself. And so what that looks like sometimes does still look like different programs and different opportunities, but also giving people that skill of continuous learning so that if there's not a seat at in a program internally, the associate still has the skills to go out and seek that knowledge elsewhere, which has been really impactful. And one of the things that I did was bring the CAP program to Capital One. As Patricia mentioned, I am a CAP alum, and I went through the program a few years ago. And as I was growing in my career and looking for an organization that did have the mobility opportunities that I mentioned earlier, and found that here at Capital One, I also believe that it was so critical for us to continue to do that at Capital One in partnership with MLT and bringing the CAP program as one of those levers in democratizing learning and development here. And so I think that's really the key is, if you continue to focus on ensuring that all of your associates have the knowledge of what they need to grow in, and then access to the learning and development opportunities to grow those skills, it will elevate all of your talent, and especially your underrepresented talent. It doesn't mean that you only need to focus on that talent or only think about that talent, because then you run into some of the challenges that we're faced with right now. But if you really think about, again, democratizing learning for all, you will account for your underrepresented talent, and you're accounting for all of your talent without some of that rub that we feel now. From an AI perspective, I think that adds another layer to your point, and Gabrielle, that oftentimes in many of our organizations, the majority of our underrepresented talent is in the levels of which the AI world is impacting the jobs. And so it's really important, again, as I've been talking a lot about identifying the skills that are needed, understanding AI, understanding machine learning, understanding data analysis and what to do. AI can only do so much, right? You do still need a human element there to understand what to do with the data that AI can transcribe for us. Getting those skills, getting them early and often to folks, even if, and maybe even especially if they are in roles where they may not think that they need to use those skills. Identifying that, knowing in whatever your industry is, how those skills apply to your industry, and giving people that even more is really critical so that we can continue to elevate our talent, especially our underrepresented talent, into the roles and levels of which AI may not be taking a seat in the future. So, different competing factors, different external forces, but the bottom line is really, and I'm not just saying this because I'm in learning and development, but I truly believe is investing in the skills that folks need across the board to be able to elevate them. And if you do that for all, you will care for your underrepresented talent, and you'll care for them in a way that minimizes the pressures from a D&I perspective, and allows you to continue doing that great work.
Well said. I think that in our program, the CAP program especially, and I'm sure other programs across the country, what we're trying to do is to open the aperture of the thinking of our diverse mid-level moving into senior level professionals. So for example, it is fairly traditional for the demographics that MLT serves. Your grandparents, parents have told you, get great grades, be the best at what you do, keep your head down. And we know that that is not the be all and end all of getting ahead in corporate America or even recently a qubit was stabilized at room temperature when we thought that couldn't happen. Can you have the conversation? And then can you begin to deepen that with some more experience by taking different courses and things? But where are you in the conversation? Because the idea of being able to understand complicated problems and solve them is coming to an end, clearly. We are moving into complex problem solving. You need different mindsets, you need different people in the room, you need a different way of approaching these problems. And I personally think, this is just my opinion, that the demographics we serve have had to be highly creative. You know, there's a song, Mas saupa, mas agua en la saupa. You know, what do you do when more people come to your party and you don't have enough food in this, you know, you put more water in the soup and you stretch it. I mean, there are a million stories like that we can tell about the creativity of what we've had to do over many, many decades in this country. And I think the complex thinking that is required requires also creativity. If you read Daniel Pink's book, and he talks about how many companies are recruiting from the top art schools, where they used to go to Harvard Business School, they're going to, you know, the Chicago School of Design, because they know those people are going to be at the forefront of this complex problem solving because creativity is required. I think it's a time that we have to really focus on how do we enable and get the word out that this is important, and this is a time where many people that look like me and you can really shine. They just need to have some direction, understanding, get the compass, and that's something we try to provide in the program.
My people leader has been the person who, on some bad days, was there for me, was able to support me. And I did have safety to bring things that I typically never would have brought to work or to that person, to them. But then I also watched that person struggle with how to handle some of those things that I brought forward. And luckily for me, it didn't end up as a negative experience, but I've seen that happen for many, especially underrepresented talent, that turn into a negative experience. So we're encouraging people to bring their whole selves to work, but we're not actually equipping our people leaders to support them. And that community building can help be a part of that support, but I also think it's really critical to give your people leaders, to give your managers the tools to foster some of that community on their own team, and to understand how to care for associates when they are bringing their whole selves to work in the spirit of community building.
Speaking of bringing your whole self to work, I think something wonderful is happening in our country and maybe across the globe. We're seeing leaders becoming more values aware and values centric in their leadership. So whether it's Colin Kaepernick, whether it's the M&Ms and Nike story about values and what happened with those commercials, or whether it's the recent departure of Gabriella Carifa-Johnson from Vogue, being able to say, wait a minute, these are my core values, and they will be my North Star in my leadership. And you'll be surprised how many times in the program that we are running, that when we do the values analysis, so many people had never thought about their values. And the ones that had were maybe off kilter in terms of leading with their values. They didn't even know that was a thing and that you could do that, and how wonderful that feels to be in the pocket of your values as you're leading, and how authentic the performance goes away. It is just who you are, and people then trust you more. You can lead with more courage. And so I think the whole DEI conversation in terms of value-centered leadership is becoming more and more in focus in this country and across corporations, which I think is wonderful.
Absolutely. And Janice, as a final question, you touched about a bit about your experience in the career advancement program. How do you feel it has prepared you to navigate the changes that you've seen within the industry for financial services, as well as just within your organization and what you've experienced?
Yes, I love that question. So I think in general, my answer to that question would be, I think one of the greatest gifts I got from the CAP program was knowing myself better so that I could better navigate all of the changes. I went through the CAP program. I started in 2020. And so it was great timing for me as we were all navigating a lot of changes. I think some of the things that Patricia highlighted really helped me in knowing myself better and understanding my strengths, and in understanding what I was willing to accept and what I wasn't willing to accept, in owning my career development and the expectations I had of the organization that I work for and what they are giving back to me. And I think for me, what was the most transformational experience in the CAP program, and I had gone through many other leadership development programs or other, high potential programs in the past, but the CAP program was the first time where I felt like I was truly the center of the experience and not just there to get ready for the next level. And what I mean by that is my favorite parts of the CAP program were learning about how to care for myself, and that it was okay to care for myself, and not just okay, but that I couldn't actually care for others without knowing how to care for myself. And I got that through some of the curriculum of the program, but also a lot through my coach. Patricia and I were just chatting a bit ago, and I have since relocated since being in the CAP program. So my coach and I met fully virtual because of the pandemic, but also because of geography. When I was in the program, we're now about 30 minutes away from each other and plan to meet in person. So I still have that relationship with that coach. That coach helped me actually navigate some changes in my life, both personal and professional. And so having that person make me feel like I was the priority, not the skills that I had or the role that the organization saw for me next, me, really helped me be able to lead with heart going forward, navigate changes, and some of the things that I've shared earlier today about thinking about how to continue supporting underrepresented talent when there's so many external factors that are telling us that we can't or that we shouldn't be. What I learned in the CAP program was to also stand by my values and to figure out a way to continue doing this work in spite of some of those competing factors. So it was transformational for me, and I'm confident it would be transformational for any participant that goes through it, but those are some of the highlights.
Can I just ask one question? What was it like, and had you ever been filmed before? As you know, we film you a lot during the program, and you watch your films in terms of your behavior in the face of feedback, your behavior, and how you land when you're presenting, and all those films of yourself. Was that off-putting for you? Was that revelatory? What was that like? Had you done that before?
I had not done that before. Before going into it, I was a little apprehensive, in full transparency, Patricia. I was a little apprehensive, but it was very powerful. Seeing yourself and being able to get deep feedback. We were talking earlier about the fact that we don't often actually get the right feedback. Getting the right feedback, getting deep feedback, having it recorded so that you could actually see exactly where that feedback was coming out was really impactful. And part of what I think made it so powerful too was the psychological safety that was created. I was being filmed by people I'd never met before, gotten feedback from people who did not know me. They did not know my superpowers. They did not know what my goals were. But to my point earlier, really prioritized me and made me truly believe that the feedback was so that I could be the best version of Janice, which created safety that we often don't have in our organizations. And it was really, really powerful.
Thank you. And Patricia, I know that you've coached talent for several decades. Do you have any additional points that you would like to add based on your experience?
In terms of coaching, well, this goes across to everybody. I think self-awareness is the key to great leadership. Whether you're leading as a parent, whether you're helping to lead in a relationship as a spouse, Valentine's Day is tomorrow, so why not bring that up? Whether you're leading your children, whether you're leading an organization or a team, and then we wonder why we're not getting different results. And part of coaching is to help you be at new choices, not to change who you are, but to think about, how do I need to parse my words in order to get this result while I'm still aligned with my values? What does that look like? And it takes more than a flash of a second. It takes some thoughtfulness. Eventually, it becomes organic. But many people don't take those 3 steps. They go right from sense to respond, sense to respond. And, we're not dogs and cats. Sensing and responding doesn't always get us where we're trying to get to. And I think having coaching to help you reflect, to help you ask the right questions, it's very different from mentoring or sponsorship or counseling or a psychologist. Coaching is a very different art form. I call it an art form because I think our coaches are so artful in what they do. We've interviewed over 118 coaches to find 14 that we believe were born to do this work. And it's important. You have someone's life in your hands. And those people have other people's lives in their hands. And so it's critical work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patricia, for those thoughts. Would love to open up the conversation to questions from the room. If you have any, please feel free to place them in the chat. We do see one that has come in, and I'll just read this aloud. And of course, Patricia and Janice, if you have additional thoughts, then you can respond there. And we've touched on this, but we can take a deeper dive here. Traditionally, companies have increased their Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous numbers by hiring at the entry level while struggling with representation at the mid to executive level. AI looks like it will cut out many of those entry-level opportunities. How do you see that impacting mid to executive level representation long-term? What can organizations do to address this?
I think the answer is they have to be deliberate. They've got to see this problem and make some clear decisions. It's not going to happen serendipitously. It's going to have to be very planful in terms of, who are we hiring at the entry level? And I got to tell you, a lot of people are going to be hiring at the mid-level, and the entry-level jobs are going to go away in many companies because the AI is going to be able to do, the machine learning is going to be able to do some of the rudimentary things, but that's already happening. And so how do you get your turns at bat to get hired, the professional hires at the mid-level? And companies are going to have to think about retraining, and they're going to have to think about how you incentivize people to hire and take some chances and bets on people. And of course, our education system is going to play a big role. So in the future, people are not going to come in like the typical college grad and MBA grad are coming in now. They're going to come in with some pretty robust AI knowledge if the schools are doing the right work, which will then, but that's going to take a while. And then that will then re-democratize the Black and brown people who come in with the same level of AI understanding and experience as their counterparts. But that's going to take a while.
We'll just amplify what Patricia mentioned. I think the intentionality is really key. This has to be a proactive approach, not a reactive approach. Frankly, the hiring at the the hiring growth that was mentioned in the company is a reactive example. So we have to be proactive, reskilling and upskilling associates into skills and job families that are not what you maybe hired them for, but there's adjacency in what they can learn and therefore in what they can do is really critical. And then would also just highlight what I mentioned before. It's not just focusing on development, but it's also focusing on the exposure, the mobility, and the retention. And in some places, it is being intentional in creating the seats and or the opportunities for folks to grow their careers. It is in being intentional about succession planning and making sure that you're doing that at multiple levels and not just for the executive level, and that there are seats in those succession planning conversations for all of the talent at an organization. But I agree with Patricia. I think there's also some responsibility on the talent themselves too. So it's really key to use the resources that are available to oneself to make sure that you're investing in the skills that are needed of the future.
And there's always that complicated question, should I go broad or should I go deep? And the answer is both. We know most senior leaders have one place where they're deep, whether it's analytics, marketing, finance, sales, some place where they have a lot of depth of experience and knowledge, but then they also have this breadth of understanding across all of the functional areas. And so we have to help in terms of our DEI populations to make sure that there's the breadth and the depth at the same time, because, the book, Who Moved My Cheese, if you stay deep in an area that's going away or that is going to be displaced by AI, you're out of luck. And so being able to make those calculations and see where your company is going, you really have to have your ear to the ground. Michael, I'm wondering if there is anything that you can share about your own experience in this DEI space, and also maybe there's a nuance from a male perspective. I know, no?
Yeah, it's interesting because what I'm seeing organizations do is to protect their programs that they traditionally ran underneath DEI. They're rolling them up underneath leadership L&D again, and by doing so, it looks like it represents multiple offerings that are being presented across the board. So it's not one that can be just singled out. Traditionally, when you have something that's under DE&I, you know, the organizations that are out there right now, they're targeting that. But it's a lot harder to pinpoint that when it's underneath the full portfolio of L&D programs, and it's one of many that's designed to develop individuals talent-wise. So that's where I'm seeing the DEI shift as far as development programs in that space. I will say this in regards to the AI and the hiring. I was on a call the other day with somebody who was trying to find people to put into their mid-level roles, talent-wise. One of the challenges that I heard was that they were still, much like Janice said, they were still looking for individuals that specifically worked in their industry, which is a very small funnel of folks, and they wanted them to have that specific background. And I really believe with mid-level talent, a skilled leader is a skilled leader. They can pick up the other pieces of it. So I think that organizations are going to have to start thinking in terms of, I know this person didn't work in the banking industry or the CPG industry, but their capabilities overall make them a great mid-level leader. And I think there's going to be a shift in the mindset as far as recruitment from that space. And then my last commentary would have to be on the CAP program, because I actually have a coach. I've been in CAP. And I'll say this, as a Black male, one of the things that I've experienced is I learned to be quiet, keep my head down. And it also impacted me with my desire to ask the right questions that I needed to do to get ahead. And I think through coaching, I've learned that sometimes when you do that, you don't know what questions you're supposed to be asking. And the coaching has really helped me with understanding what should I be asking. From my perspective, I think it's a big thing, because I think sometimes you don't want to ask because either you're worried about people not thinking you're intelligent, or because of experiences in the past, or because you're worried that it might rock the boat the wrong way. And so that's been real helpful for me. So I'll pause, but that's just a few thoughts as I'm listening to the conversations that are going on.
Thank you, Michael. One of the things I also think about that is different in what we're doing is we also look at the double and triple diversity, the DEI. So maybe you're Black, Indigenous, or Latinx, maybe you're female, or maybe you are LGBTQIA. And then on top of all that intersectionality, you also have neurodiversity, ADD,
Right.
ADHD, ADD, ADH, epilepsy, anxiety, depression, whatever else you have, dyslexia. And so you have this convergence of diversity, and some of these are like the smartest people in terms of IQ off the chain. And how are these people being managed? How are they leading? How are we helping them to become more powerful and great? Some companies do have ERGs for neurodiversity. I think Google does, and I think Spotify does, and I don't know how many other companies do, where they can think about their needs in terms of lighting, in terms of the need to have earphones on, maybe so they can become more productive and don't have all of the noise. But there's so many subsegments of diversity that we've got to think about. as we move and try to become equitable and to harness and cultivate the best talent that comes in all shapes and sizes and capabilities.
Thank you. Any final thoughts come to mind for the group?
I would just say, keep your eye on the prize. Don't give up on diversity, equity, inclusion, regardless of what happens in the election in November. Don't give up on democratizing learning and advancement and leadership. And think about ways in which you can take the limited budget that you have and do something that's really impactful. What I'm finding is some companies say, well, we're going to do a little tiny something for everybody. And then that does nothing for anybody. So sometimes you have to go big or go home. You do something really substantial for a few people, they raise their game and they pull a lot of people behind them. So, not being penny wise and dollar foolish around the expenditures and budgets devoted to DEI and making sure that our corporate landscape looks a little differently and can perform a little differently and have that incremental value that they're not going to have without it.
And I would just add and amplify what Patricia mentioned a bit ago, and in doing what she just described, be creative. There are a lot of resources that exist now that can be leveraged, and lean on the leaders in your organizations. Give them the skills to do some of this work for us. If your people leaders understand and have the skill of giving feedback, then that helps everybody. If your leaders understand how to identify what skills are business critical, that can help you know what could have the bigger impact, to Patricia's point. So I think also, leverage your resources and also really equip your people leaders at your organizations to help solve this ongoing challenge. These aren't things that a few of us supporting a few programs for some people in one organization are going to be able to solve on our own. That's a part of the puzzle, but we really need everybody. And so continue to invest in the people who can help you get that impact at scale, and be creative in using the resources that exist.
And if you don't believe us, believe Jamie Dimon.
Absolutely. Well, Patricia and Janice, thank you again for joining to share your thoughts on the landscape in terms of leadership and development and how particularly mid-career talent of color are navigating these different changes. Michael, thank you as well for sharing your thoughts, and Eric also. If anyone has any questions regarding management leadership for tomorrow, or you want to learn more about our work, as well as the career advancement program, my contact information will be shared as a follow-up to this webinar, but you can feel free to contact me, or if you have any thoughts about continuing the conversation. So thank you for joining us today, and hope everyone has an amazing day.
Thank you so much.